Welcome back to StillPoint Logic. This is episode 12. Today we're going somewhere a little unexpected. We're going to talk about your body, not as something that betrays you, but as something that has been trying to protect you all these years, and how the nervous system is actually a part of it. And I hope that you will be able to understand the concept that I was trying to convey today, because it was a little harder to write this episode, but I think it's one of my favorites. Your body is not overreacting. It's following instructions. Instructions you wrote a long time ago and probably forgot about. Your body is not overreacting. That's what this episode is about. And I want to start with a moment you've probably lived. Someone says something to you. A comment, a tone, maybe a look, and before you've formed a single thought, your chest is tight. Maybe your jaw is clenched, or maybe your cheeks are getting a little flushed. Something in your body has already decided. Then your mind arrives. You might be feeling angry or hurt. You might be feeling dismissed or ashamed. And then you start building the story. They always do this. I knew this would happen. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm just not. And somewhere underneath all that, invisibly, a rule is running. A rule that was there long before today. That rule decided, in a fraction of a second, what this moment meant. That's what we're exploring today. Not just what you feel, but why your body already knew before your mind had a chance to think. And I want to share something personal before we go further. I caught myself this week. Someone sent me a short WhatsApp message to something that I shared, and I only saw the preview, which is only like 3 or 4 words. There was nothing dramatic there, but only from the preview of the message, I already felt stressed. So before I even finished reading the full message, my shoulders pulled up a bit, and something in my head already decided what the message is going to be about. And then my mind caught up a few seconds later and started building the story. They're not happy, or they're dismissing me, or maybe I said too much. I should have kept it simpler. None of that was true. But my body didn't wait for that fact. It responded to the rule. And the rule in my brain said, if someone sends you a message about something that you said, then probably something is wrong. In earlier episodes, we talked about the thought behind the feeling, the hidden belief that shapes how we experience things. Today, I want to go one layer further back, because there's something that happens even before the thought arrives. Most of us were taught that emotion works like this. Something happens, we think about it, then we feel something. But that's not quite the full picture. I think this is what actually happens. The rule was already there. The event wakes it up. The body responds fast before the conscious mind has caught up. Then the mind arrives and names what happened. The emotion becomes conscious, and the conclusion that forms is often intensified by the very rule that started everything. So it's not event, thought, feeling. It's closer to rule exists, event happens, body executes the rule's logic, mind arrives and names it, emotion intensifies, conclusions form. So the rule is both the origin and the filter. It shapes how the body reads the event as it's going on, and it shapes the meaning the mind assigns coming out. So that's why two people can be in the same room, hear the same comment, and have completely different experiences. Same event, different rules, different bodies responding, different emotions landing. So the event didn't cause the reaction, the rule did. This is also why calm down is one of the least helpful things you can say or hear. Because by the time someone says it, your body has already responded. So the rule has already fired. The emotion is already moving through you. Telling someone to calm down at that moment is a little like telling a fire alarm to stop beeping without checking if there's actual smoke. So it addresses the signal, but it doesn't address the source. And there's the deeper problem. If the rule stays intact, the body will keep responding. Every time a similar event happens, the same sequence runs. So instead of asking, how do I calm down? The more useful question is, what rule just activated? Not, why am I overreacting? The question already contains a judgment, but what just became threatened? That's the shift from suppression to curiosity, and from fighting the feeling to understanding its logic. One of my favorite philosophers, and one that I draw a lot of inspiration from, his name is Baruch Spinoza, and he wrote about this in the Ethics. He said that you cannot overcome a feeling by reasoning against it directly. A feeling only shifts when it meets a clearer or stronger understanding. So it's not an argument and you're not suppressing anything, you're trying to understand it. The Ethics was written at 1677 and it still is true to this day. Now let's shift gears to the body and why I think the body is not dramatic, it's actually loyal. Your nervous system, it doesn't overreact. It executes the logic you've internalized. What it does, it responds to what the rule says the event means, not to the event itself. So think of it like a guard who's been giving very specific instruction. The guard doesn't question the instruction. The guard just follows them. So if the instructions say, if the rule says this equals threat, the guard mobilizes every time, consistently. So if the rule is, if I fall behind, I lose control, then anxiety in a busy week is logical. If the rule is, if I disappoint someone, I lose the connection, then hypervigilance around other people's moods is logical. If your rule is, if someone is distant, I did something wrong, then silence feels unsafe. And if the rule is, if I'm not productive, I'm failing, then rest feels uncomfortable. Think about it this way. Anxiety is not chaos. It's a rapid search engine trying to prevent loss. Anger is not dysfunction. It's a boundary enforcement energy. And shutdown isn't actually laziness. It's conservation when overwhelm exceeds capacity. And each state has its own logic. Each one is the body's doing exactly what the rule asked it to do. So your body is not being dramatic. It is being consistent. It is doing exactly what the rule told it to do. And this is actually important because it changes the conversation from what is wrong with me to what does my system believe is happening here? Those are very different questions. One shrinks you and the other gives you something to work with. And going back to Baruch Spinoza, he wrote about this in his work Ethics again, and he argued that emotions are not irrational disturbances. They have their own internal logic. He called them effects, states of the body that increase or decrease our capacity to act. Spinoza wasn't dismissing emotions. He was taking them seriously enough to examine them, and that's exactly what we're doing here. Let's dive into some mini stories, and they might sound familiar because I try to use almost the same ones from episode to episode to keep some kind of continuity, but try to find yourself in one of those. The first one is Sophia and the unanswered email. Sophia sends an important email to her manager. A day passes, no reply. Her body registers it before she's consciously noticing anything. A low level of tension and a slight tightening through her shoulders. By the next morning, the thought has formed. Something is wrong. She traces it back. The rule underneath: if I'm not acknowledged, maybe I'm not valued. But as always, underneath these thoughts are always something that you're trying to protect. So underneath that, the virtue was she cares deeply about doing meaningful work, and she wants to contribute something that matters. So that's not a flaw, that's a dedication. So the rule distorted it into a threat, but the virtue is real. And then the reframe is, silence doesn't measure my value. People are busy, distracted, managing more than I can see. I can follow up, and my worth doesn't depend on the reply. The second story is Marcus and the change of plans. Marcus had his week carefully structured. Then a last-minute change arrives, a rescheduled meeting that shifted a deadline. Then immediately his jaw clenches. Before he thought about it, his body is already braced. The rule here is, if I lose structure, I lose stability. But the virtue underneath it is that he values reliability. He takes his commitments very seriously, and he wants to show up well for himself and for others. And that's not rigidity. That's responsibility. The reframe can be, adjusting a plan is not the same as losing control. I can be flexible and still be dependable. The structure should serve me. It doesn't define me. The last story is about Nadia and the quiet room. Nadia walks into a room and senses something has shifted. And that happens a lot at work. It's either silence, or suddenly conversation stops, or someone looks away. Her chest drops, and she feels misplaced before she said a word. So the rule, if people pull back, I've done something wrong. They know something that I don't know. The virtue might be is that she values connection. She pays attention to people around her, and she notices she cares about other people. That's attentiveness, and it's good. And the reframe could be, a quiet room has 100 different explanations. Most of them have nothing to do with me. I can stay present without reading the worst into silence. Here's something I want you to hold on to from these stories. Every rule, even the ones that cause us pain, starts somewhere real. The rule, if I disappoint someone, I lose the connection, didn't come from nowhere. It came from someone who learned somewhere along the way that love felt conditional, and that approval had to be maintained, that being too much or not enough had consequences. So the rule is the distortion, but underneath it is something true. There's a deep wish to simply belong, to be seen and to matter to people who matter to you. That's not a flaw to fix. That's a human need to honor. And the work isn't to try to be less sensitive. It's to loosen the rigid rule that turns sensitivity into something that is an alarm. When the rule softens, the body doesn't have to brace so hard. So not because the care disappeared, but because the care no longer has to feel like survival. When you feel that familiar activation, whether you feel it in your chest or your heart starts beating faster, maybe you're feeling like you're heating up, or you suddenly have like your palm in a fist, try this. Not to fix it, just to understand it. First, name the sensation without judging yourself. Say, not I'm overreacting, just say I'm activated. That single word creates a little distance, so you're observing it instead of being swallowed by it. Second, ask one question. What just became threatened? And not why, not how, just what. Usually the answer is one of a handful of things. My competence, my connection, my control, my dignity, or my safety. Third, find the rule. If X happens, it means Y. Say it out loud if you can. Until you can articulate it, it runs in the dark. So once you name it, it becomes something you can examine. Fourth, find what's underneath it. Not the distortion, but what are you trying to protect? What's the good thing, the virtue that's underneath it? So what does this rule say about what you care about? What you were trying to protect? That part deserves some focus and respect. Fifth, try to offer a gentle version. Not a forced positive thought, just a more flexible one. Something that honors the care without the alarm. And finally, wait before you conclude. When you're activated, the mind narrows. So don't send the email yet. Don't make the declaration. Don't make the decision. Don't rewrite the meaning of the whole relationship or the whole situation just yet. State it first, wait a second, and then act. Now a short reflection pause, so let's take a moment together. Think of a recent moment. Your body reacted before your mind caught up. Something that felt wrong before you could explain why. And many times we feel uncomfortable, or we feel that we were asked a question that we feel uncomfortable answering, or we are in a situation where we don't know how to describe it, but something in our body is saying something here is not great, but because we can't put it in words, we don't give it enough attention. And what I mean by saying we don't give it enough attention is because I can't define this made me feel like that, sometimes I don't even say no to things that I don't want to do, or I don't leave places where I feel unsafe in. And we don't need to wait for this moment to happen. And that's because when our nervous system is kicking in and our body feels it first, we don't need to wait for our brain to be able to define it in words. That's our signal. Hey, something's not great here. I need to step away and think about it for a second and see what I really want. Saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you later with an answer is not avoiding. It's giving yourself a chance to actually digest what is happening and decide if this is something that you are okay with or not. And if you are out somewhere with friends or family and something is happening, excusing yourself to the washroom to take a breath and think about what's going on is not wrong. You're not hurting anyone. It's just you're giving yourself a minute to collect your thoughts and make thoughtful decisions. So let's take a moment together. Let's think of a recent time your body reacted before your mind caught up. when something felt wrong before you could explain why. And just sit with that moment for a second. Now, what was the first sensation? Where did you feel it? What thought arrived next? And underneath that thought, what rule was running? If this happens, it means what? Noodle a little bit in your head, and then if you can say it to yourself or write it down, it's great. But now ask, what does that rule say about what you care about? What were you protecting? That's the virtue. And now, is there a more flexible version of that rule? One that keeps the care but loosens the alarm? You don't have to answer it now, and probably no one can answer it perfectly, so don't even try. And you don't have to feel different right now. But if you can just think about these moments as they come and notice the rules, then that's the first step in the right direction. We're getting closer to the end of this episode. Just a few more things I wanted us to talk about. The first one is try to think of your nervous system like a thermostat. A thermostat doesn't decide the temperature based on today. It responds based on what it was set to a long time ago. So if it was set in a cold house, it runs the heat even on mild days. Not because it's wrong, but because it's doing its job based on the instruction it was given. So you can't change a thermostat by arguing with it. You have to adjust the setting. And the setting in your nervous system is the rule. When the rule shifts, the system recalibrates. Not instantly, but predictably, and over time, the body stops treating discomfort like danger. It starts treating it like information. That's nervous system intelligence. Not calm for the sake of calm. Not ignoring or suppressing dressed up as peace, but understanding what your body is protecting and deciding consciously whether that protection is still needed. Now let's go a little deeper into what that actually means. And now I'm going to be a little bit more philosophical, but hang in there with me. Because nervous system intelligence is not a destination. It's a capacity that develops over time, and it changes something very specific. It changes the gap. What I mean by that is when nervous system intelligence is undeveloped, the event and the reaction feel like one thing. Something happens, and you're already inside that feeling before you noticed it arrived. There is no space between the trigger and the response. It's automatic and total. But as the rules shift, as the thermostat recalibrates, something begins to appear, a gap. Almost imperceptible, but it's there. A fraction of a second where you notice the activation as it's happening rather than after. Viktor Frankl is another great philosopher who wrote about human freedom even in the most extreme conditions, and I recommend reading all of his books. He also wrote about this, and what he said is that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. That space, I think, is nervous system intelligence. Not the absence of feeling, but the presence of choice. Now, and this is important, nervous system intelligence does not mean you stop feeling things intensely. It doesn't mean you become calm, unaffected, or neutral all the time. And it doesn't mean that the thermostat stopped running. What changes is the accuracy. You feel what the situation warrants, not what the old rule decided it warranted years ago in a different room under different circumstances. So a little less distorted by old instructions that no longer fit the present moment. Someone with nervous system intelligence can still feel anger, grief, you can still feel anxiety and move through it, but the response begins to fit the moment more closely. The thermostat doesn't disappear, it just stops running the heat on mild days, and that over time with the work of examining the rules is what changes everything. That's it. This is the end of this episode. I hope this wasn't confusing. And if someone wants to talk about this a little more, I'm happy to continue the exploration. And as always, I want to thank you for being here. And here are my closing words for you to take from this episode. Your body is not your enemy. It's a faithful, loyal system running the logic you've carried, sometimes for decades. The goal was never to silence it. The goal is to understand it, to find the rule, to honor the virtue underneath, and to offer something more flexible to the part of you that has been working so hard to keep you safe. And I know that's not a small thing, it's work, but it's very doable and achievable, and I've been doing it for a very long time and it works. And before you go, one small invitation for this week. The next time you feel activated, and before you can explain it or actually verbalize it and act on it, and before you start judging yourself, just ask one question. What rule just fired? That's it. And don't try to solve it, and you're not going to be able to reframe it immediately, but if you can just notice it and see what you find, that will make you feel better. Because the rule you name this week might be one you've been living by for years without even once choosing it consciously. That awareness, that single moment of naming, is where everything begins to shift. I want to thank you for listening. The reflections in this podcast are inspired by logic-based therapy, a philosophical counseling model developed by Dr. Elliot D. Cohen. I'm a certified logic-based therapy consultant, and what I share here is my own perspective on its principles. This podcast is meant for reflection and learning and isn't a substitute for professional mental health. Take care, and I'll see you next time at your StillPoint.